All right. Okay, so in this video, I want to point to the key to awakening, so to speak, the key to all this. What is at the root of the separated identity that feels like you in thought? What is at the root of what gives that identity its reality? And this is the end to this common experience, in a way, of half in, half out, of having moments of clarity and then moving back into identification and seeming like you've lost it, or having awakening experiences as something that happened to me in time, and then having the like the antithetical experience to that, or the opposite to that. This is seeing this clearly. Essentially is the end to the seeking, or the end to the reality of the seeking, or the belief that this seeking must continue because I don't have something that I'm trying to get. This is the key, what I'm going to talk about. This really is the key to it, and it's a subtle thought, a very fundamental assumption that is itself a thought. And this feeling of self, this feeling of separateness, of me-ness, of ownership of experience and thought as the thinker, as the subject, separate subject of experience, has a feeling to it. I can't tell you what it is, because I don't know, but it has an energetic quality to it. It's an energetic thingness, a feeling of a real thingness here in an energetic sense. And there are a lot of associated emotions, let's see, kind of energetic, emotional feelings-based accumulation, and let's see, you move through all that in this, but the initial obstruction, the initial illusion that you see through, is the assumption of me as a person, as I relate separately to my experience, and that's a thought. But this is what's so tricky about it. It's not a solid thing. It's not a thought in the form of what we would usually consider thinking about an object or an image of an object. Not really. It can be, but not really. That's not the fundamental identity. So I'm going to read a comment here from Death Train. Sounds like a metal band. And he says, I was wondering for a while about the wispiness of thoughts. I wasn't sure what it is. It seems to be more blatantly obvious when you're just sitting and noticing or allowing. Yeah. Which I guess is what meditation is. I've also noticed that if I put my attention, this is the important part, on a more solid thought, it seems to evaporate. Yeah, that's an important point. And if I get lost in a thought stream, the other sense is dull. The visual field is slightly out of focus. Yeah. Because we're moving away from direct experience into this illusory internal world. What the body touches is almost forgotten. Yeah, you're not even aware of it. And the ringing in the ears gets low. Yeah, as well as all sound. The important point there, I don't know your name, sorry, was, I noticed if I put my attention on a more solid thought, it seems to evaporate. So by directing attention consciously to the thought, how weird is that when you try and find it, it's just not there. But there's a kind of half asleep quality. There's a not attentive in the same way quality when we're identified with thoughts. It makes it seem real. That's what they call in the traditions ignorance. Ignorance. There's a very different quality when we direct attention, let's say, to the thought. We look at the thought consciously. Night and day compared to half awake being carried by the thought into the narrative that just makes it seem real. But when we stop and look, what is the thought? What is this thought? And then it would maybe seem like consciously make a thought. There's kind of like almost feels like an element of control there. It's not really like that, but it feels like that, and that element of attentive focus gives the thought a completely different quality. And if we try and consciously find the thought, what is a thought? What is it made from? It just fucks off. It just fucking disappears. It just can't be found. Because this illusory self only operates in in ignorance, let's say, in not attentiveness, in half asleepness, in identification. So there's like a kind of ignorance is maybe, I'm not trying to blame anyone for this because that's not what I'm saying. Maybe not a great way to put it, but there's an ignoring of what's going on right now, which is the thought. in the narrative, in the real narrative of thought and time, there's an ignoring of the thought that's happening now, the quality of that. What is that? And it is happening. It is an experience. It is thought. What's suggested in the thought is not real, but the thought, you could say, is real. So what is the key to this? And I talk about this more recently a lot, is when you look for the thought, you see that, or if you think a thought appears now, there is an experience of thought. It's something that's happening. You could say the thought could be viewed as an object in consciousness. It's not clear where it is or what it is, but it certainly is, for sure. The actual thought stuff, the experience of thought. Then we're looking to see, what am I? Where am I? Or what feels like me here in this? It helps sometimes, if we're heavily identified with thought, to move into the physical sensations, into the senses, into the body sensations. And that kind of anchors us, or the breath anchors us in the present moment, creates a little bit of a distance or an expanded subjective position from which we can become aware of the thoughts as they come up. Now here's the key, right? When you look for me in thought, you can, a thought might appear of an image of myself as a body, as me in a scenario, as me viewed by other people, so on and so on, as an object, right? But that's not what I'm pointing to here, right? I'm pointing to self, me, the thinker, the owner of experience, the thinker of the thoughts, way at the very start of all this. And it's an assumption. It's hidden in the context of thought. It's hidden in the theme of thought, and it comes at the start. Before the objective story appears, there is the assumption that I am me thinking this story. I'm somehow in this as a separate entity. And it's not even there at all. It's not even there at all. It's only suggested in the thought. So see, when you look for the thought, it might disappear. You might enter a thoughtless space. But there was a thought, and then there wasn't a thought. The self is never there in the way that the thought is seeming to be there, because it's merely suggested in the context the content, the theme, the story of the thought as me, the thinker. And it comes... someone mentioned Paul Hederman. Paul Hederman would call this a pre-assumption or a presupposition. It presupposes, this thought narrative that I go into presupposes the existence of the me that owns these thoughts, that thinks, that's the doing, that's meditating, that's looking for thought. That's the trap. I'm looking for awakening. I'm looking for me in thought. The me's already there. You never find it because it doesn't exist. It is assumed. It's just assumed in the thought. It's so subtle. It's so sneaky, but we can miss this for a long time. It only exists in time. It can't exist outside of time. It seems like a feeling of me. So my feeling of me had undertones of fear, shame, all mixed up into this indistinguishable experiential feeling. It was a thought. There might have been energetic qualities coming up with that, or emotional qualities coming up with that, but it felt real. It was a thought. It really doesn't seem like a thought, but it was a thought. It was a very sneaky assumption. I'll give you an example. So I sit down to meditate. I'm like, okay, I'm meditating. I'm looking for a thought. And then suddenly we have this, or I listen to or read the thing, non-dual, where have the words gone? Talk. And there's a moment of clarity, right? A recognition, right? A moment of clarity when that me just is split second forgotten about. It just isn't there for a second. But you weren't aware of that when it was happening. You couldn't so then after this you were thinking, so what was that insight? What was that insight? And then you're trying to capture it. Then you're in time. The assumption makes it seem like that is something that happened to me. You see the assumption in this. You see how this is in the context of the thought. It takes that experience that when that experience was clear, you weren't none of the story, none of the context, none of that was needed. It really seems like it does when the mind suggests that this was a recognition that is tangible and it happened to me. But you don't need to do that. You don't need to do that. The mind does that automatically. It contextualizes the apparent experience of clarity into my experience immediately. And as soon as you're in the thought stream thinking about that, the presupposition, the assumption has already been assumed. It's way at the beginning. That's why we need to get that's why we need to stop, let's say, it's not doing, and stay there. Stop and let it all thin out. The experience was the thinning of that assumption, that me, that's here all the time and relates to experience. It was just kind of forgotten about for a bit. But very soon after that, the assumption is assumed. It hides there as an assumption, and it only appears now in thought, but it gives the assumption of continuity. It suggests that it's there all the time and it's real. It only ever suggests that in one thought now, because there is no time. This thing can only exist in time, and it's not even a thing. It doesn't exist. It's a vague suggestion, and it seems very very real at the time. But let's say I'm gonna limits of language. I'm gonna say what you are, your nature as you actually are. Bad way to put it, right? But that which is not a thing sees the assumption. The assumption becomes clear to something that's not a thing. This is where it gets paradoxical. The assumption becomes clear that there isn't anything there. It's suggested, the me is suggested in the context, and it happens way at the start. It happens before we're off and running with thought, before we start seeking. This thing is there, and it's in every thought until it's not, or it seems to be in every thought until it's not. And after this is seen, and the reality of that, I can't talk today, the reality of that collapses or is broken. There can't just be thought without it being my thought. After that illusion is seen through, then there can just be thought. There's no resistance to thought one way or the other, because the thought isn't the problem. It's the assumption that it's a type of thought, or a type of thought belief, a fundamental, deeply held, subtle belief that these are my thoughts, they relate to me. This is my experience, I relate to it. I'm a me doing something, I have autonomy, I'm trying to get something that I can get or I can't get, I do have or I don't have. Let's try another example. So you're sitting meditating and thoughts come up, and the thought says, I just can't get this, or it's not happening, or this experience is very clear. So this experience is very clear is a statement, but the statement refers to the one who's having the experience. This is clarity. That statement, can you see where the self is in that? Can you see where the owner of experience, the reference point of experience, the one who refers to experience, is in that thought? This is clarity. This is where I'm going to say who says that? Who observed that? Who observed that? Then this is clarity. The clarity to someone who refers to that as clarity. It's a simple statement like that. The me is hidden in there. It's before that thought formed, the assumption was there that I need to think about this to grasp it, that I need to make a statement to myself about it to understand it. I mean, these are overt narratives that I'm talking about. It gets even more subtle than that, to the point where you start to see the function of it. You start to see, let's say, how it happens, how it creates time as it happens now, as one thought. And then when you inverted commas, look for it, when there's an orientation towards that, it's never found, because it's not there in the first place. Then when that's clear, you can just stop. You can stop searching for something as a referential character. The assumption doesn't have the power anymore, because we've got right to the root of all of the seeking, all of the problem. And that's what I would call the shift, the recognition, the fundamental change. Because the whole thing is being seen as an illusion. It doesn't need to be clear. It's not clear what it's seen by, because that would be another thought. But we've seen the function of it. So the power is gone. It will still continue to do that. It's weird. What thought does is when we get close to seeing this, it goes wild. This seeming entity tries to reassert itself, reinstate itself as real. So when we start seeing it as not real, it'll fight to survive, and it's just a survival instinct. It's just trying to do what it has to do to protect you. and it really is an act of love. It's not like you're fighting this thing and you're going to defeat it, and then it's like, fuck you, I've defeated your ego, and then now you're done, and now I'm a super ego, or something like that. I posted a post on Reddit about this, and when this clarified, I said that I finally saw the self as an entity that was just looking out for my best interest in the only way it knew how, and it was endearing, and it was love. And then it could be let go that way. It could be, didn't have to be fought with anymore. But what it does is it goes, oh no, I'm dying, no, I don't exist, and all this kind of shit. And there'll be a physical reaction sometimes as well. So I had panic attacks when I went through this initially, like full blown panic attacks, where I thought heart was racing, shaking, dizziness, all that kind of stuff. A physical reaction to the dissolution, let's say, of this illusion, or the realization that this is an illusion in the first place. That the me, the owner of thought and experience, just isn't there. And then when that scene, it tries to assume itself again and take a position on that. It just keeps trying to do that. And then once that's clearly seen, it can't really do that anymore. It can't do that with the same reality. So it goes wild. And then you get the physical, let's see, manifestations of that realization, that recognition as well. But the key is the assumption. What am I assuming about what is me? What is the assumption that feels like me? What am I? Where am I in this? And then watch for thought. Say you say you feel this is my body. This is my body. Right? Or this is a body. Move into the body, move into the senses, undeniable, and then ask, where am I in this? What feels like me? What feels like me? What am I? Here? Or then what is the thought suggesting about what feels like me? And just watch for thought. And just keep doing that. As soon as it comes up, as soon as it's noticed, let's say, drop back into direct experience. And as it quiets down, as the overt narrative starts to kind of thin and die down, then you see the root. Something sees the root of the basic function that protects itself by going one step ahead all the time. You're looking from here. I'm looking from here at thought. You're going back until we kind of get under that. I don't know if that's a good way to put it. We get under that, but it will keep trying to push out, look at this from this position that's just assumed. And once we, let's say, get under that, then we can see it, that it was just an assumption. And it's not actually there, and never was. An illusion. And it's flimsy at best, it's paper thin, it has no weight to it anymore. The illusion has been seen as an illusion. And when that's seen, that's it. You can never unsee that. You can never really go back into identification in the same way. There's I don't know if it's Buddhist or Vedantic, the rope and the snake. So you see a snake from the corner of your eye, and you only because you see it from the corner of your eye, you like get frightened by it and run away. And then you're walking down the same path and you see it again, and you're like, this snake's chasing me. And eventually you stop and you look at it and it's a rope, it's not actually a snake. And when you see that it's a rope, it's not a snake anymore. You're not going to believe it's a snake anymore. The illusion is done. But the key to this is, like the commenter, sorry I don't know your name, mentioned, directing attention consciously towards thought from, let's say, here, wherever here is, and really becoming clear on the, if you've had awakening experiences where you've had moments of clarity, sorry my neck's really sore, and back into identification, you've got this fluctuation, this transience of clarity that's not quite stable. You still feel like it needs to stabilise. Then being clear on the difference in the quality of experience between being lost in the identification with thought, you're just in it, you are it, you're gone, it's real, and then having some space there where you can objectify that narrative as a narrative. And that might still be happening from a position. So there's also this kind of like pseudo realization that the self, the me creates to keep itself there alive, and that's what we would call seeking. It's the new context for the same old thing that it's been doing this whole time, and the new context is spirituality. When you see this, when this clarifies, there's a weirdness to this, because you see that it's not what you thought it was. It's not spiritual in the way that the self framed it. It puts it on the spiritual pedestal to chase, and that keeps the assumption going. It keeps you chasing something that it thinks it is, that it's going to get, and it gives you little bits of, maybe giving too much credit, but it gives you little bits of clarity here and there, or maybe that just happens and then it recreates the context with the assumption around that after it happens and bases it in time. It's based in time, but it's all right now. It always appears now as one thought, So look at so when you sit initially, there'll be like, it will be framed in time initially. So we meditate, we bring ourselves into the present moment, and then this assumption keeps framing it into time. So you see thoughts coming and moving, and there's a subtle timeline suggested in that. That's the point of view of the assumption, the self, the thinker. Go more in a granular way into, or in a single pointed way into it. Look at the thought as it appears. Battery's running out. Look at the thought as it appears now. As soon as it comes up, notice it, and when you notice it, it will dissolve. Bring the attention, well, the attention already is here in the present moment, and just keep doing that, and keep doing that. When the narrative is kind of stopped in its tracks, it'll diminish in its overt solid, like the commenter said, solid form, and it'll become more wispy. It'll become more less fully formed, and you kind of start to see them forming. You start to see the thoughts as they form, and they're noticed, and then they kind of disappear back into this kind of ocean of awakeness. And then when it comes to, it might not go like this. Like, this is just a model. All of this is a model, right? I'm just kind of describing my experience. Let's frame it in my experience, right? So when it calmed down to an extent, I was aware of it seemed like a feeling, like an energetic thingness, an energetic me-ness. And I felt the urgency of it, the time-based nature of it, the competing for, let's say, attention of whatever of it. And then I saw the assumption as it came up and tried to create a thought narrative with me in it, I saw the function of it. And when you see the function of it, you know that you're not that. It's done. You know you're not that, and it's clear because you've just seen it happen from, let's say, a different perspective. It's not quite like that, but and it's really paradoxical because you see that in a way the thoughts, the assumption never referred to anything real, but what it was based off of was non-dual nature. It appeared as non-dual nature. It appeared outside time, not dependent on time. It appeared not dependent on separation. So none of that was ever there at all. And it where was I going with this? It's gone. Yeah, it refers to awakeness. It's awakeness pretending to be a separate thing in awakeness. So in a way it kind of does refer to something real, but it's not what was suggested in the assumption. So weird, it gets paradoxical, and then because of that, the clarity just comes through to a level that it isn't dependent on experiences, isn't dependent on time, isn't dependent on me experiencing clarity. It's just there, and it gets so simple. So it's like the taking the step back thing. When we're looking, you get in touch with the energy of looking, of seeking. You take a step back and you stop. Someone earlier in the comments mentioned that it tends to happen. Doesn't have to be a certain way, but it tends to happen when you get to a point of exhaustion with the seeking, and you just kind of give up, take a step back. And sometimes when you take a step back, then you just see it because that seeking energy has been released. It's just been accepted. Like my experience, when I saw this, I accepted it. It was accepted because it was clear that nothing could or couldn't accept. Nothing could or couldn't. What I am could or couldn't resist. There was no resistance in it. There was no duality in it. There was no this or that. There was no the way it should be. There was no labelling of something, oh, that's not real. I didn't need to do that. That wasn't needed. It was clear anyway. The self-confirming nature of this supports practice in the way that the objective mind could never do. But what we're doing is we're looking for me. We're looking for what am I, where am I, who am I. One that resonated with me is where am I in this? It'd be like kind of what am I and where? Because there's something here that feels like me, so then we're just looking for that. So I feel I'm here. Then what feels like me and where is it? And can it be found? This self-inquiry. And we never find the illusory self, and we never find awakeness. The awakeness is already here, and the illusory self never existed. So that's the key to all this, is the assumption. What is assumed in the context of the thought narrative that feels like you. And once that's gone, then you get access to a whole emotional landscape that we just didn't have access to before, and that can be moved through and expressed without resistance, without obstruction. without labelling good or bad. The emotions can just move through. And the more this moves through, the more this energetic shift, this energetic transformation starts to clarify, the more simple things get. So what feels like me? And see what is a thought and what is not a thought. What is the basic function that's suggesting that I am a thinker, that I own this experience? And you don't need to come back and confirm it. You don't need to analyse it. It really seems like you do. It really does. When we have a non-dual experience, the mind will try and frame it. The self will try and own it. And it really believes that it needs to do that. Or that's actually what happened. I understood something objectively, and then that's what led to that clarity. So now I need to understand it again, and then it starts. It's already assumed. None of that needs to happen. Just let it go. And eventually we see that we don't have to maintain an emptiness of mind. That there's no such thing as a maintained emptiness of mind in time happening to someone. And we don't need to resist thought, because the one who resists it has been seen to be a fiction. All there is thought. And thoughts do diminish a great deal, but that's not the goal, that's not the objective. There's no objective with it. The thought can be thought without the thinker. And then without that assumption, all of this becomes impersonal, but more unified, more close, more peaceful, more like love. And we see that didn't need to be personal or conceptual. And that was creating the suffering. What we thought was satisfaction, love, compassion, peace in a personal way was just a thinning of the assumption that suggests that that's not inherent in reality the way it is. And there's a great relaxation with that. Anyway, that's a long one. I'll do for now, and I'll talk to you next time.